This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. We're marking the one-year anniversary of the Mueller investigation, and Rudy Giuliani, part of Trump's legal team, of course, said on the occasion of this one-year anniversary, basically the thing's over.
It's the Mueller-versary.
Mueller-versary.
Okay, get it right.
Right.
Yeah, last night
Beltway
Giuliani
types,
was
yeah.
on Fox News.
We're going to see what kind of legal remedies are available to us, including if they subpoena us, challenge the subpoena. But I don't think they agree to the process question, which is the same reason they can't indict him, they can't issue a subpoena to him. And remember, Clinton opposed the subpoena, and then he voluntarily complied.
Just remember, before we go
Have a party?
celebrating in conjunction with the royal wedding, which
Exactly.
I know you'll be celebrating, this has always been, the end game has always been impeachment, not indictment. So Mueller telling the Trump legal team, according to Rudy G., that there will be no indictment. I will abide the opinion of the Justice Department from 20 years ago. Could very well be. But that's not Mueller's endgame. Mueller doesn't want to bring down the presidency. He wants to provide the information for Congress to do the dirty work. You see, he's not going to do it himself. He's just going to present the raw material for No Justice, No Peace Maxine and the gang to use. That's what you have to understand, in my view. For another view, we're pleased to be joined by our friend Steve Cortes, CNN, a political commentator, and also the former head of Trump's Hispanic, I don't know why I can't speak the language, Trump's Hispanic Advisory Council. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Thanks for having me.
So what was your take on Rudy's pronouncement?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think he's right, and I'm glad that the Trump legal team seems to be taking a less conciliatory approach. I think they cooperated, frankly, too much with Mueller in the past. And I actually got to talk to the president myself about this, and I said, you've got to get more defiant with him, and I totally agree with you. The end game here, it's not about justice. It's not about an indictment, which is probably legally impossible. I don't think it's about subpoena. It's about creating a narrative that they can then hand over to what they hope will be a Democratic House come January of 2019 to proceed with impeaching the president. And that is what it has always been about. I believe that the mainstream media, the so-called resistance, a healthy part of the Democratic Party, they have never come to terms with what happened in 2016. They literally cannot accept it. And so because of that, they want to try to overturn the will of the people and the electoral revolution that we achieved in 2016. But rather than doing it the right way, via votes and via the democratic process and debate, they want to try to use impeachment. And I'm trying to shout from the rooftops every chance I get to Republican voters, get motivated about November. Even though Trump's not on the ballot officially, he is unofficially, tacitly on the ballot because this is about impeachment.
Yeah, so you think if the House flips to Democratic, then they'll definitely have an impeachment proceeding?
I think they'll at least begin the proceedings. They might. I think it would be political suicide for the Democrats to actually impeach the president. I think as it did with Bill Clinton, it would actually make the president stronger and more popular. It would actually create some sympathy for Trump, which isn't a really easy thing to do, to be quite honest. So I think it would be politically dumb, and they might be able to restrain themselves, but they might not. And I think the proceedings at the least would begin. And my guess is it would come to a vote. Now, I obviously hope this doesn't happen. I hope they don't take control of the House. I hope there is no Speaker Pelosi or, Speaker Maxine Waters, God forbid, or somebody like that. But if they do gain control of the House, I think they're going to at least pursue it. They're going to at least go down that path. I'm not sure they go all the way there over the cliff, but they might. But this Mueller's probe, Dan, I think you're just exactly right. This is not about justice. This is a political operation. And the more we learn, by the way, this is fascinating. I would encourage all your listeners to read the New York Times reporting on this week on Crossfire Hurricane, as the FBI operation was called, which sounds like it should be a game on PlayStation that my son is playing, right? But the more we read about the corruption of the Obama Department of Justice and FBI, the more we learn, I think, that the accusers of Donald Trump actually are guilty of the very crimes which they're trying to affix to Donald Trump. I mean, that's the irony here. They're committing the crimes that they're trying to manufacture a case against Trump on.
Right, but to your point, and I think that's right, if you think that this is going to be decided on the merits in terms of the decision by Democrats were they to gain control of the House, even if they saw their deficit in the Senate increase, there is so much pressure from what is the modern 21st century Democrat Party, which is Antifa and P-hats and socialists, so much pressure and to pursue impeachment, to go the distance with respect to Trump. And we saw it again, this underreported story, but Tuesday's elections on the Democrat side, you had moderate Democrats turned out by hard left Democrats. I mean, there is this move hard left, and it's happening within the primaries. You're starting to see it in the primary season. The idea that the revolt of the socialists against sort of the corporatist Democrats ended when Hillary Clinton was nominated and Bernie Sanders was dispatched. No, it's been redoubled.
Mm-hmm. No, listen, it's a good point, and again, that may very well happen. I think if the Democrats were to take control, if they win in November, to me, the tip-off will be, is Nancy Pelosi elected Speaker? Because she has already publicly talked against impeachment proceedings. Years ago, when there was somewhat of a movement when they controlled the House, there was somewhat of a movement to impeach George W. Bush, if you remember, as a supposed war criminal.
Right.
She was the one who stopped it then as Speaker. So, listen, I hate to in any way praise Nancy Pelosi, but I think she is politically more astute than some of the hard lefties in her party. So if she's elected Speaker, my guess is they don't go the distance for impeachment. If she is not reelected Speaker, and if they put somebody left of her, which is insane to me that there's even space to the left of her, but if they do, then that tells me they are hell-bent on impeachment, and we're going to have that fight, which would be terrible for the country. But I will say, ultimately, I think it'll actually be good for Donald Trump.
No.
So it doesn't worry me as a Trump partisan that much, but I'd still rather not have the fight. Let's keep the House. Let's make sure that the voters know in November that it's not just, that local person, the congressman or senator that they're voting for. It's an impeachment referendum come November. And Donald Trump's popularity is rising, admittedly from low levels, but it's rising. And his popularity on issues is not low at all. It's actually huge on things like the economy, things like Korea. So, I'm going to be out there as much as I can on shows like yours, on television, writing, pounding the table about the successes we've had so far, the future successes that are possible, but that can all be unraveled if we hand the House, if we hand the keys to the car to the Democrats, who are desperate, at least a healthy portion of them, desperate for impeachment.
Now, Amy, you know my policy with respect to using sports metaphors for politics.
Nobody can. It bothers you unless you do it yourself.
Correct. That's my policy.
So here we go.
So I may have to make an exception for Steve because he wrote a piece, Washington Examiner, that compared Trump to the greatest coach in the history of organized sports, the Wizard of Westwood, John Wooden. And Trump retweeted it. Of course he did. And so...
there's something positive about me. Retweet.
Positive? I mean, comparing him to John Wooden and 10 championships in 12 years, Steve, get a hold of yourself.
A bit of a stretch. I'll be the first to admit that. But hey, I got him to retweet me. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Has that happened before?
No, which has bothered me. I mean, because I've given blood for this man on television, taking on CNN and MSNBC. He has never tweeted me before this, so it's about time. But I'm not holding a grudge. No, look, obviously his recent win streak is not comparable to the Wizard of Westwood. But my point is that he's on a win streak, and a pretty major one, and one that the media does not want to talk about, mainstream media. And I'll give you an example from yesterday. He had a meeting of a lot of California officials who oppose California's sanctuary city, sanctuary state policy, which is just utter insanity in my opinion. And a lot of the local people there, sheriffs, mayors, county folks, oppose it, and they're starting to actually pass ordinances to that effect. So he had them to the White House to have a meeting about sanctuary cities. He was asked by a mother of a victim of an MS-13 criminal. He was asked a question about MS-13, which is probably the most vicious gang that has ever operated in America. Scary stuff. It's something that we've got to nip in the bud immediately. And responding to that, he said, these people are animals, talking about the MS-13 gang members.
Right.
all the mainstream media, New York Times, ABC, CBS, if you look at their Twitter feeds, all of them tweeted out that the president said that illegal immigrants are animals. It shows you the level of bias, which he didn't say. He said MS-13 gang members are animals. But given that level of bias, I feel sometimes like I have to engage almost in a bit of hyperbole and say that he's the Wizard of Washington because of the recent win streak, because it just gets no credit. And the win streak of hostages returning from Korea, an amazing jobs number, moving our embassy in Jerusalem, getting us out of the awful Iran deal, just one after another, ticking off on campaign promises made and promises fulfilled. He's really on a roll, particularly in this month of May. And that was really the point of my article. I hope it becomes Wooden-esque. I hope he has so many victories that, Dan, even you'll agree that I'm not exaggerating.
Well, and he'll need to pen a book of poetry, too.
Right.
All right, so June, right around the corner, June 12th, is that scheduled meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. What's your gut feeling? Do you think it's going to happen?
Yeah, I'm guessing it will, because I think he's put Kim Jong-un in a corner, quite frankly. And
nobody puts Kim Jong-un in a corner.
That's right.
Nobody puts baby in the corner.
Or KJU. But no, he has put him in a corner. How? Through tightening the economic sanctions massively, through a lot of diplomatic pressure, mainly through China, because President Trump's the first president in American history who realizes we hold the cards with China, right? China needs us desperately, and we can get them to do the things they should do, like pressure Pyongyang, which they're doing. And then thirdly, I think honestly his rhetoric was important. Demeaning him to some extent, calling him Rocket Man. There's method to the madness. That was genius, right? Put him in a corner where he knows he has no alternative if he wants to survive, I think, and this country is going to not collapse, that he has to start normalizing, moderating. And what he's already done is, by the way, pretty incredible. So he's already stopped shooting rockets into the ocean. He met with the South Korean leader, promised to negotiate finally an end to the Korean War, returned our hostages. These are all great positive steps. Now, let's see, is he going to act rationally? Is he going to show up in Singapore and act rationally? No one knows, but President Trump has promised us that he'll walk away. And, he doesn't have to save face. He'll walk away if it's unreasonable. But even the idea that they're meeting, to me, is a major breakthrough and shows that he is not – President Trump, I think, in terms of foreign policy, has done two things that both Bush and Obama didn't. Number one, he's been really restrained in the use of American might, which I think is terrific. No needless interventions, no nation building. We're going to stop doing that all over the world. But then number two, much more clear-eyed rhetoric and admonitions of our adversaries, people like North Korea, letting them know that we're not going to be intimidated or we're not going to cower for them in any sense. And I think we're already seeing the results. We're seeing it there. On the other side of Asia, in Iran, it was announced yesterday that Total, who is a French oil giant, is pulling out of a $2 billion project in Iran because of our sanctions, our renewed sanctions. So I think we're going to see similar fallout for that regime, for the Tehran regime. This is just smart policy, using the economic pressure that we can and trying to achieve a more peaceful world. And if he can pull this off in Korea, I think he can. It puts him up there with the statesmen of history. It really does.
He is Steve Cortes, CNN political commentator, also a former head of Trump's Hispanic Advisory Council. His latest piece got the presidential seal of approval, the official retweet. Trump's winning streak rivals one of the greatest streaks in sports. You can get it at realclearpolitics.com or WashingtonExaminer.com. Steve, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great day.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.